Someone has to pay for this. It's not right.
It was an ordinary Tuesday morning in Chicago. Children laughing, the squeak of sneakers on school pavement, the chatter of parents exchanging quick goodbyes. And then, within seconds, that calm was shattered. A single gunshot tore through the air, and a young mother's body crumpled to the ground, steps away from where she had just kissed her little boy goodbye. Her name was Romeka Meeks Blackman. She was 31 years old. She had walked her son into school, held his small hand, reminded him to listen to his teacher, and promised she would be there when the bell rang. Moments later, she was gone. Witnesses say they saw her walking toward her car, smiling faintly, scrolling her phone, maybe checking a message from work or from family. Then a woman approached her. There were words, sharp, fast, almost too quiet to catch. Then a flash of movement, a scuffle, and the crack of a gun. The school courtyard froze. Parents screamed. Children stood silent, eyes wide, backpacks slipping from their shoulders. Romeka collapsed onto the cold pavement, her phone skittering out of her hand. Blood pooling, sirens approaching, the echo of that single shot hanging in the air like smoke. And in the middle of it all, her little boy was just steps away, shielded inside the school building, unaware that his world had just been torn apart. Police rushed in. Ambulances arrived. But it was too late. By the time they reached her, Romeka's heartbeat was fading. She was pronounced dead before she could make it to the hospital. This wasn't a robbery. It wasn't a random outburst of violence. It was something far more personal and far more devastating. Because the woman accused of pulling that trigger wasn't a stranger. She was connected to the man who fathered Romeka's child. And in the hours and days that followed, a story began to unfold. One that spoke of jealousy, betrayal, and a tangled web of emotion that ended with a young mother lying lifeless outside her son's school. But the questions haven't stopped echoing. Was this confrontation planned? Was Romeka lured into it? Or was it an argument that exploded in front of a school full of children? Her family says this wasn't chance. They say Romeka was set up, and now they want the world to know her story and to see the truth for what it is. This is not just the story of a murder. It is the story of a devoted mother whose love could not save her from the darkness closing in around her. A woman who lived for her son and lost her life in front of the world he knew as safe. In this episode, we'll uncover the heartbreaking murder of Romeka Meeks Blackman, a mother whose last act of love was dropping her son off at school. Stories like this show how quickly life can change in a single moment. Don't risk missing the truth behind stories that could be happening in your own community. Subscribe now. Let's go back to where it all began. Before that tragic morning, before the echo of a gunshot silenced a young mother's heartbeat, there was life and love. And a woman named Romeka Meeks Blackman who was trying to build something beautiful for her son. Romeka was 31. She was vibrant, determined, and fiercely protective of the little boy who became her entire world the moment he was born. Friends said she carried herself with quiet strength, never boastful, never hardened by the struggles she faced. She grew up on the south side of Chicago, in a community that demanded resilience from anyone who hoped to rise above the noise. She worked hard, balancing the demands of motherhood and her career. She was the type who showed up early to work and stayed late if it meant giving her son a better life. Her social media pages were filled with pictures of her boy, his smile beaming at birthday parties, at school events, in her arms. If she ever posted about herself, it was usually through the lens of motherhood. She loved being his safe place, but life wasn't simple. Her relationship with her son's father was complicated, marked by moments of closeness and long stretches of distance. They had known each other for years, their bond fraying under the weight of broken trust. Even after they separated, their lives were still tangled, if only because of the child they shared. And then, there was another woman. She had become involved with Romeka's former partner, creating an undercurrent of tension that simmered quietly beneath the surface. There were whispers of jealousy, of rivalry, unspoken but deeply felt. Family members later recalled that Romeka tried to stay above it, tried to keep her focus on her son, not the drama swirling around the adults in his life. But jealousy has a way of creeping in where love once stood. People who knew the other woman described her as volatile when angered, quick to feel disrespected. There were arguments on social media, cryptic posts, veiled jabs that only those closest to the situation understood. Romeka didn't engage, at least not publicly. She seemed determined to protect her peace, to shield her child from the storms adults created around him. The South Side neighborhood where she lived was a place where families fought to hold on to stability. There were mornings filled with the sounds of school buses and laughter, but also nights where the sharp wail of sirens reminded everyone how fragile safety could be. Romeka knew that world. She grew up in it, and she worked tirelessly to make sure her son could dream beyond it, but even the strongest walls can crack from within. In the weeks leading up to her death, small signs of tension began surfacing. Quiet warnings from friends who told her to be careful, strange phone calls, an uneasy feeling she couldn't quite name. And yet, every morning, she carried on, walking her son into school, hugging him tight, telling him she would be back. Until the morning she didn't return, Romeka lay still. Blood spread beneath her like ink on paper. The woman stood frozen for a moment, gun in hand, her breath clouding the cold morning air. Then she ran. Sirens erupted in the distance, the courtyard filled with chaos, shouting officers, wailing ambulances, the metallic tang of fear heavy in the air. Paramedics tried to save her, but the damage was done. Romeka Meeks Blackman, just 31 years old, was pronounced dead within minutes of arriving at the hospital. Her son sat inside his classroom unaware. The bell would ring that afternoon, but his mother would never come back to pick him up. The investigation began in chaos. Officers cordoned off the school courtyard with strips of yellow tape that fluttered in the cold February wind, marking the ground where Romeka's body had fallen. Shell casings glimmered faintly on the pavement, and a child's dropped lunchbox lay just feet from the bloodstain that refused to fade under the paramedics' boots. Detectives from the Chicago Police Department's homicide unit arrived within minutes. Their first priority was control, evacuating the scene, clearing children from windows, and moving parents back behind the cordon. But behind the firm orders and clipped voices, there was a silence, the kind that comes when seasoned investigators know they are standing in the center of something personal. This wasn't random. Everyone could feel it. A mother was dead in front of her child's school, and she hadn't been robbed, she hadn't been caught in crossfire. She had been singled out. Officers began collecting witness statements. Some parents had seen everything, others had only caught the end. The sight of a woman fleeing, gun in hand, weaving between parked cars. One mother said she saw Romeka raise her hands in a gesture that looked like surrender moments before the shot. Another said she recognized the shooter's face, though she wasn't certain of her name. Security cameras from the school and nearby houses became critical. Detectives pulled hours of footage, grainy clips showing the woman arriving on foot minutes before the shooting and then sprinting away afterward, disappearing down a side street. Within hours, they had a clear suspect, the woman tied to Romeka's child's father. Her name was whispered among the parents who waited outside the police station that afternoon, demanding updates. Many of them had known the tension between the two women, though no one had imagined it would end like this. Police tracked the suspect's known addresses, questioning her family and monitoring social media for any sign of movement. At the same time, they dug into Romeka's life, her phone records, text messages, emails, looking for proof that the confrontation had been arranged. Her last texts were haunting in their ordinariness, reminders about groceries, a message confirming her work shift, a heart emoji sent to her sister. Nothing that hinted at the danger waiting outside her son's school. But Romeka's family told detectives something different. They believed she had been lured. They said she mentioned receiving strange calls in the days before her death, calls from blocked numbers that left her uneasy. She hadn't wanted to worry anyone, and she hadn't wanted to involve the police. Now, the detectives carried that weight. They interviewed her child's father for hours, pressing for answers, watching his face as they described what had happened. He denied knowing about the confrontation. He said he was shocked, but they noted the tremor in his hands, the way his voice cracked when they said her name. Within 48 hours, a warrant was issued for the suspected shooter's arrest. The hunt had officially begun. The arrest came quietly, almost anticlimactically, after days of tense searching. Detectives found the suspect, identified as the woman who had been involved with Romeka's child's father, hiding at a relative's apartment on the west side of Chicago. There was no dramatic standoff, no chase through city streets, just the thud of fists on a door and the slow emergence of a woman who had become the center of a city's outrage. Handcuffed, silent, she was led past the cameras that had gathered outside. Flashes erupted, reporters shouted her name, and she stared straight ahead. Her face was unreadable, neither remorseful nor defiant, just blank. Inside the courtroom weeks later, the atmosphere was very different. There was no silence here. The air crackled with grief and fury as Romeka's family filled the benches, clutching framed photos of her smiling face, their eyes fixed on the woman accused of stealing her life. Her young son was not there. He was too young to understand the rituals of justice, too young to sit beneath the gaze of strangers who whispered about the morning his world ended. The prosecution built their case methodically. They described how the suspect waited near the school that morning, how she approached Romeka, argued, and then fired a single shot at close range. They played the grainy surveillance footage, Romeka walking calmly toward her car, the suspect rushing forward, the blur of sudden movement, the scattering parents. The audio captured the crack of the gunshot, followed by screams. In the courtroom, several people wept as the sound echoed off the walls. Witnesses took the stand, parents who had seen the confrontation, teachers who had pulled children to safety, even a crossing guard who described hearing the suspect shout something moments before the shot rang out. Their voices shook, but their words were steady. They all said the same thing. Romeka hadn't been attacking. She had been walking away. The defense tried to argue self-defense, claiming the situation escalated suddenly and that the suspect had felt threatened. They suggested prior tension between the women, hoping to blur the lines of intent, but the prosecution dismantled it piece by piece, pointing to the planning, the waiting, the single deadly shot aimed at Romeka's chest. Romeka's mother testified, her voice breaking as she described the daughter she raised, the daughter who loved fiercely and deserved to grow old. "Her little boy asks where she is," she said, clutching a small photo in her trembling hands. "I have no answer to give him." The jury deliberated for just 4 hours. When they returned, the room went silent. Guilty of first-degree murder. The judge's voice was steady as he pronounced the sentence. Decades behind bars, a lifetime lost to cold walls and locked doors. The suspect stared forward, expression still blank. Romeka's family held each other and sobbed quietly, not with victory, but with the hollow relief of knowing at least part of the story had ended. Justice, in its slow and imperfect way, had spoken. The courtroom had become a silent battleground. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead as Romeka Meeks sat at the witness stand, hands trembling slightly, eyes glassy from a mixture of grief and exhaustion. Every detail of the case had been unraveled before the jury like a chilling tapestry. Phone records, witness testimonies, and the haunting footage from a nearby school security camera capturing the moments before her life was shattered. Prosecutors painted the picture of a deadly love triangle turned ambush. Her ex-boyfriend Marcus Johnson, fueled by jealousy, conspiring with his new lover, Chantel Carter, to eliminate the woman who stood as a reminder of his betrayal. The jurors leaned in as the prosecutor replayed the 911 call Romeka's terrified friend had made when the shots rang out. The sound of tires screeching, children screaming in the background, and a voice gasping, "Romeka's been shot," echoed through the room. Romeka's mother sobbed quietly in the gallery. This wasn't just another case file, it was a mother's worst nightmare. Investigators testified about how Marcus had meticulously plotted the attack. He had tracked Romeka's daily school drop-off routine for weeks, noting when she arrived, when she left, and when there were the fewest witnesses. Phone logs showed late-night texts between him and Chantel, that read like coded plans, cloaked in romance. Detectives uncovered messages saying things like, "She won't be in our way anymore," and "Tomorrow's the day we start fresh." That fresh start came drenched in blood. The defense tried desperately to poke holes, suggesting it was a random drive-by in a violent neighborhood, but the evidence crushed their claims. Ballistic experts matched the shell casings to a weapon Marcus's cousin had reported stolen, later found buried in a vacant lot, wrapped in a t-shirt with Marcus's DNA on it. Surveillance footage showed a car registered to Chantel circling the school that morning minutes before the attack. When Romeka took the stand, her voice cracked as she recounted the moment the gunfire erupted. "I remember seeing his face through the windshield," she whispered. "It was Marcus. I saw him, and then I just remember the pain and my son screaming." Her testimony pierced the courtroom like glass shattering on tile. Some jurors wiped their eyes. Even the judge paused before continuing. In closing arguments, the prosecutor's words were sharp as a blade. Marcus Johnson decided that if he couldn't have peace, then Romeka couldn't have life. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was an execution planned out of jealousy, fueled by betrayal. As the jury deliberated, hours stretched into an eternity. Romeka waited outside with her family, clutching a photo of her son. When the foreperson finally read the verdict, guilty on all counts, a wave of emotion swept the courtroom. Justice had spoken, but the victory was bittersweet. Romeka had survived, but the woman she once was had been buried on that school curb with the shattered glass and spilled blood. The sentencing phase became an emotional reckoning for everyone involved. The courtroom, though relieved by the guilty verdict, was still raw with the lingering tension of what had been laid bare over the past weeks. Romeka sat quietly beside her attorney, her body visibly thinner than when the trial began, the trauma etched in the hollow of her eyes. She had survived the physical wounds, but what Marcus took from her could never be restored: her sense of safety, her peace, her trust in love itself. Before the judge handed down the sentence, the court allowed victim impact statements. Romeka's mother rose first, clutching the framed photo of her daughter smiling with her little boy. Her voice trembled, yet held an iron core as she spoke directly to Marcus. "You tried to take my baby away from me. You tried to take a mother away from her son, but you failed. She's still here, and she's stronger than you will ever be. You can rot in that cell knowing she lived." Next came Romeka's best friend, who had been the one to call 911 that day. Her testimony painted the horror of those moments, seeing Romeka slumped against the car door, blood soaking her blouse, and the agonizing minutes waiting for paramedics while her child wailed in the back seat. Tears streamed down several jurors' faces as she recalled how Romeka's trembling hand had reached out and whispered, "Please don't let me die here." When it was finally Romeka's turn, she stood slowly, gripping the edge of the podium to steady herself. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't scream. Instead, her tone was hauntingly calm, the kind of calm that comes after surviving a storm so violent it leaves nothing else standing. "You wanted to erase me," she said to Marcus without blinking. "You wanted my son to grow up without his mother. But every day I wake up and see his face, I remember why I fought to live. You didn't just try to kill me, you tried to kill everything good left in me. But you failed." A heavy silence settled as the judge finally spoke. He condemned Marcus's actions as cold-blooded and premeditated, calling it one of the most calculated acts of intimate partner violence this court has ever seen. Then came the sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Chantel Carter, who had cooperated late in the investigation in exchange for a plea deal, received 25 years for her role as an accomplice. As deputies led Marcus away in shackles, he glanced once toward Romeka, but she did not meet his eyes. She was holding her son's hand, and for the first time in years there was a flicker of something in her face, a fragile but undeniable light. It wasn't joy, not yet, but it was hope. And hope, for Romeka Meeks, was the beginning of reclaiming the life that betrayal and bullets had tried to steal.